It must be based on a shared vision of long-term goals, an agreement on frameworks. We're looking at the Kyoto Protocol that's coming up now to set targets for emissions for developed countries, and that is expiring at the end of this year. And we need to really negotiate a new Kyoto Protocol. When is it going to happen at the next conference of parties to the Framework Convention on Climate Change this year? We remain optimistic. And we have to look at national, regional, and international efforts together in order to address this threat. Adaptation. You've heard a lot about adaptation. Adaptation is crucial to us. It's going to cost us billions of dollars, but in the long run, it's going to be useful. And I want to hear from you how you see yourselves adapting to the impacts of climate change. We also have to look at crops, building more resilient crops. Higher temperatures, there are crops that can exist in higher temperatures and therefore improve our food security. If we have to stabilize CO2 levels between 500 and 550 parts per million of CO2 equivalent, we mentioned it's going to cost about 1% of GDP. But if we attempt to stabilize at 450, which is a much more acceptable level, it really is going to be extremely difficult and costly. So finally, I want to leave with you, before we get into discussion on adaptation and mitigation, the benefits of strong early action outweigh the costs. Ignoring climate change will damage economic growth. Measures to help people adapt are essential. The less mitigation we do now, the greater the difficulty of continuing to adapt in the future. Okay? And my final recommendation to you, there is still time to avoid the worst impacts of climate change if we take strong action now. So I want to ask you, basically, how do you see yourself helping in a situation like this? We have two basic types of action that we can take. We can adapt, we can mitigate. Adaptation means dealing with the consequences, coping. What kinds of coping mechanisms do you have? And if you look at mitigation, you're saying, how can we prevent the emissions of carbon dioxide? How in our actions and in our lives, we can emit less of the greenhouse gases, of which carbon dioxide is the main culprit. Can you tell me some of the ways in which you think in your daily lives you can adapt to the impacts of climate change? For example, sea levels are rising. The majority of our populations are along the coast. What can we do? Should we move inland? We can move inland. Where are we going to go? We can go higher. We have transportation difficulties. Most of our infrastructure as well is along the coast, right? We depend on the coastline. Many of these islands depend on the coastline for the economic activity, fisheries, tourism, recreation. How can we adapt? What about buildings? Can we look at buildings, the building codes for extreme events?
With regards to that, well, I actually had questions related to other parts of your presentation, but with regards to your question, I guess you just asked, I guess with regards to adaptation may be a bit difficult to implement as quickly, so maybe probably mitigation might be best in the short term. I know that I'm actually from Barbados, and I know, well, once we saw that the coastlines were receding, we automatically allowed that no more buildings be allowed to be built along the coastlines. And then you now have new regulations you have to abide by in order to do that. And then as Barbados is really dependent on our tourism industry, the hotels located along the coastline also have to abide by certain environmental standards. Many of them are seeking environmental certification in order to operate within the green economy. So that only shows the viability or the profitability of, I guess, the green economy and how it can help trade in the Caribbean. With regards to the adaptation and mitigation efforts, and obviously dollars and cents is probably the most important factor, especially a small island developing states which have limited resources and limited endogenous capacities. So my suggestion is, what is your opinion on, say, current negotiations in the Rio +20 and also with regards to environmental goods and services and liberalization of those particular services and goods. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we had also, I just want to add in Barbados as well, you have a setback, a 30-foot setback from which you can, that's from the high water tide, you build 30 feet from that. And I don't know if in many other islands that they are. Rio Plus 20, what do you say about Rio Plus 20? Rio Plus 20, the outcomes were weak. Yeah, they were quite weak, and they again calling on the international community to support the countries in meeting commitments under the Framework Convention on Climate Change, desertification, the UNCCD, the Convention on Biological Diversity, but they have not come up with any targets. And that is the challenge that we still face. And this is where the Kyoto Protocol is so important, because that is the one that complements the Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, and it sets the targets. And countries have to make commitments in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Also, they've got to make commitments, the international community has to make financial commitments, commitments about building capacity in small island developing states, commitments on technology transfer, and that's very, very important. We're looking now, with respect to the second part of your question, we're looking very, very much to South-South cooperation. We're no longer bringing in expertise from Europe, United States. We're looking to our partners in the South, and Brazil is very close to us. So at ECLAC, when we are increasingly using expertise from Brazil, increasingly so, and high quality, very, very high quality expertise we are getting from Brazil. And I do agree with you, mitigation is simple in many ways, and there are two parts to mitigation, energy efficiency, and we can all use energy more efficiently, we know that. We have a society here with energy at 4 cents per kilowatt hour, exceedingly cheap. You can't even begin to put that in United States dollars. You know, well, she's saying Barbados dollars as well. It is exceedingly cheap, but we must be responsible enough to try and use energy more efficiently. And I'm sure you have ideas about how we can do it more efficiently. You know, the compact fluorescent lights that you use instead of the incandescent, those burn much, much less energy. We have different ways in which you carpool. You saw the initiative of the Ministry of Environment to use solar energy to light the priority bus route. That is an initiative that they're going to start as well. So there are several things that you can do in your own lives. Any other questions? Any other suggestions, comments? Okay, so anybody wants to, okay, there's a young lady coming there. Should I leave this with you?
Morning. In terms of mitigation and adaptation, for along Ryson Road here is reclaimed land. The sea is going to take it back, so you can build seawalls to mitigate, and it also stop in the heart of Port of Spain from flooding as well. So that'll mitigate the amount of flooding, and it'll also decrease traffic problems for people who travel on the east-west corridor to and from school, so it'll make it a lot easier.
Thank you. But as she mentioned flooding, I basically want to ask you, what really causes the flooding in Port of Spain? Rubbish. The way we dispose our rubbish. After rain, if you look just around the savannah, the number of cups and bottles that come down and are stuck on the grids over the ravines, it's rubbish that's really causing the flooding. But your point is well taken in terms of the sea defenses. Guyana has done that as well. And they're basically, they have to reinforce them now as they anticipate rising sea levels. Any other comments?
Morning. Can you hear me? Okay. Also, with regards to mitigation of the the rising sea level. I think with Trinidad and Tobago, we can also encourage and foster the growth of wetlands and mangroves. Like, I think mangroves are really important because they also, like, and what if we were to have a tsunami? They also would break down the pressure and would protect our inland resources and whatnot. And we could also, like, you know how they build walls around the coastal areas? Use like a lot of, use car tires. That will be like, that's a way of like recycling, and also they really don't like get affected by the seawater. And I think we can use that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, well done, thank you. And I basically just wanted to end by indicating to you the work that Nicholas Stern did for Britain, ECLAC is doing it for the Caribbean. We have so far looked at the economic impacts of climate change on several vulnerable sectors of Caribbean societies. And we have about 24 reports out on our website about that, where you actually see the costs and benefits. And there are 3 for Barbados: tourism, coastal and human settlements, and health, I think. And transport, it's transport. And for Trinidad and Tobago, there is energy, health, and agriculture. So we have costed the impacts of climate change. We have said, we have also calculated, and this is projecting it to 2050, yeah? What can you do? And what are the most cost-effective measures you can do to adapt, and the most cost-effective measures to mitigate as well? So you can go onto the website, just search for ECLAC, you get the website, and you get all of these reports on your website. Any other questions?
Hi, good morning. I'm from ECLAC, which we deal with agriculture and forestry. I think that what's crucial towards mitigating the climate change is within agriculture and forestry itself, like educating the public as to what their practices do to the environment, as far as like cutting down the mountains for development, and using environmentally unfriendly chemicals in the agricultural processes. If the government could have some sort of policies whereas we use more environmentally friendly chemicals in our agriculture, I think that would go a long way as far as mitigating the effects of climate change. Thank you.
Well done. Thanks very much. And finally, what action can we take right now? What action can you and you, what can you take right now? I put it to you, you can plant a tree. Because I'm sure all of you know that trees trap carbon dioxide in photosynthesis, right? Plant a tree. That's one action you can take. You're starting to walk the talk now, right? So try and do that. When a bulb goes bad, replace it by a CFL. You are the young people, you're going to be the leaders later on. So you can help your parents in raising their awareness of climate change impacts and what they can do to alleviate the situation. You alone can't do it, but don't leave the responsibility to everybody else. Whatever you can do, do it. Thank you very much.